Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Sheard, and I'm a strategic manager at City & Guilds, and I've been working with the ILM team for the last year and a half on the Leading Through Values report. And we're really excited for you all to be able to join us today so we can share some of our findings. And today, we're all here to talk about values. And when we think about our own values, it's really easy to see how they affect our lives. So in our personal values, we use them to guide our decisions. So the really big life choices, it might be where we live, it might be how we parent, it might be who we decide to have relationships with or not, where we decide to work. And even the little decisions, values can affect how we kind of interact with the world around us. So where we choose to shop, who we spend time with, what we spend our time doing. Values are really at the heart of everything that we decide to do. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to think about it from an organisational perspective. So we know that personal values guide our day-to-day decisions, and as I said, affect those really big decisions and the really small decisions. But actually, when you think about the values in an organisation, can they be used in the same way? Can they guide organisations in terms of the way that they make decisions? Can organisations lead through values in terms of how they interact with everybody in that organisation? So whether it's from the employee experience, the customer experience, how they make strategic decisions and how they deliver them operationally. How can you embed and weave values into the very DNA of an organisation? How can you move from having values that are just on the wall to actually values that everybody feels part of? And it becomes that connectivity across an organisation, even if it's across different teams, different locations, global organisations. We wanted to speak to organisations that are doing just that. And about a year and a half ago, when we started noticing this theme with values across different organisations, we took the opportunity to invite people to share their story, to talk about how they're leading through values. And it's been an absolutely fantastic journey. If you haven't read the report already, you can download it on ILM's website, Leading Through Values. We'll also be circulating an executive summary and key findings after the webinar today. But to give you a flavour of some of the key themes that we found across all companies that we spoke to, that people often choose values over remuneration. So what we found was that when a company has strong core values, it attracts a particular kind of employee, somebody who also holds values in high esteem and wants to be part of a culture that has strong core values. It's about building relationships that are mutually beneficial between the employee and the employer, and that values we're seeing across the board are becoming more and more important in terms of being authentic in the way that people can engage with them. We found that organisations who went through a consultative process in defining their values often performed much better because it gave everybody a sense of ownership and an investment in that process across all stakeholders within an organisation. Interestingly, we found within company culture, there's a movement away from hierarchy, and that very nature of consultation and value creation showed that leadership were investing in the values in the same way as everybody within an organisation, and that companies are moving to much less hierarchical structures than in previous years, giving more people the opportunity to have a platform and a voice and create a culture where everybody feels truly part of it. And one of the key findings that we found was that leadership must invest in values. It must be invested in at every level, in every role in the organisation, and that everyone has to be seen to be living the company values authentically. And that really has an impact on absolutely everybody within the organisation, bringing together people in a unified way to share in a value base that is so powerful. And if we think about how powerful our own personal values are in the way they guide our day-to-day life, and think about companies that can adopt that approach and actually be able to use their values as that guiding principle, the results are fantastic. And today we're really lucky to have an amazing panel of speakers that are here to do just that, to share their story, to tell you how they're leading through values. And in the first instance, what I'd love to do is just introduce you to the director of City and Guilds Foundation, so Sally Eley, who's going to be able to share a little bit about City and Guilds Foundation story, about how we lead through our values as an organisation, and introduce you to our panel. I'd also like to say, through the chat function that you have in Zoom, we'd love to hear your experiences as well. So please use the opportunity to join the conversation and share how your organisation is leading through values as well. So Sally, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna, and welcome everyone. It's lovely to be here today. It's such a great subject to talk on and to find out more about. So I'm really excited to be doing this one, actually. So just before I start, obviously I'm facilitating the conversation today, as Anna said, and I have got some notes. So if you see me looking down, I'm just trying to make sure I'm not being rude. A little bit of context about us then at City and Guilds. Our mission and purpose has remained the same for some 144 years now. We're all about helping businesses and individuals continually improve their skills, their performance and their productivity through training and development. And whilst we do that in different ways, that's what we're about. And through the foundation in particular, which, as Anna said, is the area that I work in and that I'm going to focus on in today, we amplify that purpose by removing barriers for people getting into jobs, by celebrating best practice on the job, and by advocating for jobs of the future. And we really try to use our values and bring them to life through all of our programs and all the things that we do. And we're conscious that that can be done through the relationships that we're building, the programs we're delivering, and the behaviours that we're demonstrating. Just as Anna said, like your personal values, it's about making sure that you keep true to your organisational ones. And in fact, only yesterday in our team were having a session on how we could refresh one of our internal programmes, our staff awards. And we use the values almost as a barometer to check in and say, are we being true to what we're trying to achieve? Another way in which we hold ourselves account to living our values is to measure the impact of our work. And for the last few years now, we've had a real focus on measuring the social impact. We are a charity, and it's important that we are able to evidence how we deliver that benefit back. And we have an impact measurement framework, which sounds a little bit wordy, I know, but really it's just a tool to make sure that we're all working to one common goal, and making sure that we're clear from the outset what it is that we're trying to see and the impact that we're trying to have on our stakeholders and customers. And through our social impact report, we're able to demonstrate, improving social mobility through skills development by tracking the number of learners that we've worked with and with them what they've gone on to do, and the impact of the foundation programs that we run. So going back to those foundation programs then, as I said, in our team, we really do use the values to make sure that we are keeping true to our purpose and aims. And the Princess Royal Training Awards is a good example of that. And I know that many of our audience here are today from our Princess Royal Training Award Network, and our lovely panel are also alumni from the awards. So that's also, we'll hear more about that, I'm sure, later. But for those of you who are not familiar with the awards, these are all about recognising excellence in learning and development. And it's because it's a standard, it's not a gold, silver, bronze. It's all around any organisation can get this award if they evidence that the learning and development they've done has had an impact, made a difference to the people who've taken part and on the organisation itself. And it's open to all sorts of organisations, big, small, commercial, charitable. The common theme is that an excellent L&D programme has had a real benefit to the organisation and its people. So the way in which we link our City and Guilds values through the awards, through this programme, and I should have said actually, our values are inspire, improve, achieve and trust. That's what our organisational values are. So we think that we inspire people to raise and achieve their aspirations through the awards. We improve the performance and productivity by providing a standard of excellence in learning and development and running a community of best practice, of which my 3 panel guests are part of. We assess and recognise achievement, making success visible for our recipients and also for others, sharing that best practice. And we also inspire trust through a really rigorous assessment process. Don't let that put you off applying for the awards. It's worth it, I promise. And we hold ourselves to account and act with integrity. So anyway, enough about our values and how we use them. I know what you're here to really is to listen to my panel guests. So I'm delighted to welcome 3 recipients of the awards here today who are joining us to share their experience and expertise of leading through their values. So if I can invite my panel, Candice, Kate and Lee, to turn their cameras on, then everybody can see you. Here we go, lovely, like it when technology works. Lovely, and you've all come up in a line. That's very nice. I never know how people are going to show up on the screen, do you? So first of all, could I introduce Candice Gardner, who is the Education Manager at Dermalogica. Then we have Kate Ross, who is Learning Leader at IBM. Both Dermalogica and IBM have received the Princess Rules Training Standard several times. So they are, we know each other very well from many different events and many conversations where we've talked about how we can share more best practice with more people. And then finally, Lee Edwards, who joined our community in 2019, I think, when Veolia, so I should have said you're from Veolia. Lee is the head of HR strategy at Veolia. And they've only just, I think, recently relaunched values. So it'll be interesting to hear how Lee got on with that. So in a moment, I'll be inviting the panel to I'll be exploring a number of areas, from the formation of lasting values, how authenticity and continuous investment in values really impacts on customer and employee experience, and how our panel members really use their values as tools to ensure the organisation achieves its purpose. So, Kate, maybe I could start with you. In our research and case studies, we know that involving your people in creating the values in the first place really makes a difference. It leads to higher investment in those values from all stakeholders. So can you tell us, how were yours formed at IBM to ensure that everyone felt part of the process?
Yeah, absolutely, Sally. And thanks for the invitation. In order to really tell the story properly, I need to take everyone back to when our values were formed in 2003. So they were formalized. The three values we have were formalized in 2003. And in 2002, that was when Sam Palmisano had taken over as global CEO of IBM from Lou Gerstner, who, for those of you who remember, rescued IBM and completely turned the tanker around in the 90s. So where we were in 2002 was we had a new CEO in Sam. We had acquired PwC Consulting at the time, adding tens of thousands of new employees around the world. We had shed parts of the business and we were acquiring other parts of the business. And at the same time, we were changing our technical strategy. So our technical platforms were changing from a focus on mainframe to a focus on service-oriented architecture to support the .com boom. So there was an enormous amount of transformation and change going on, right? So that sets the scene. And you think about the transformation plus all the change in people around the world, it gave us an opportunity to reset the values, because, we got to a point where, you had to ask yourself, like, who are we now? What do we stand for? Why am I staying here in this company? And so there was, there'd been this massive shift, and we took advantage of that opportunity. We were all affected, and so the values were actually formed through a massive. It was like a live jam session, is what we called it, and they were formed by everyone. So everyone was invited to contribute. And it was important because we had gone through this massive change.
And how many people were involved then in your jam? I like that expression you use.
Yeah, so it was a live jam session. There were over 300,000 people around the world involved. It was really cutting edge. So we operate in 70 countries. There were over 300,000 people involved, and it was really cutting edge technology back then. And it was 72 hours live chat. So it was on an online platform. It was, you know, there were multiple conversation threads. They were monitored. They were always monitored. You had to log in. You know, you couldn't log in anonymously. And it was incredible.
Well, that sounds really exciting, actually, although very hard to pull together. I don't envy the team who then had to, you know, filter that down, but exciting. I can see how that would have been exciting to be part of. What impact did the consultation process then have on the values that you adopted?
Well, it had a huge impact because, like I said, we were going through this massive transformation. We were asking ourselves, how are we supposed to work? You know, what is our defining factor? What makes us IBM now? And so the impact was, well, first of all, like, it was cool. So it was a huge talking point, you know, because it was a live jam session. We were using cutting edge technology, and it had like nerd appeal, which really works, you know, in a company like IBM. So first of all, it got everyone talking, right, about it. And we were using analytics and AI, and we were, you know, pulling meaning out of the conversations, and we're able to boil it down to those 3 values. So what it meant in terms of how we adopted it, first of all, you know, everyone was talking about it. We all created it. But then it's not enough to like have you develop the 3 values. Sam comes on and says, here they are. This is what we've, you know, used our technology to identify and define. It's not enough for them to say, okay, you know, go forth and practice these values. So what we did was embed them right away into things like our performance assessment, right? Around the world. We were all assessed against our 3 values. And it was definitely driven top down, but it was also driven across. And they've stood the test of time, the 3 values. They're, you know, dedication to every client's success, innovation that matters for ourselves and for the world, and trust and responsibility in all of our relationships. And those are 3 values that have simply stood the test of time. And so an intranet website sprung up with those 3 values, and then stories. So people were invited around the world to video their stories about client success or innovation or trust or relationships, and to post them to the website. And so through stories, through examples, through performance assessment, real measurement, and then training, you know, they just become part of our connective tissue. Really.
And I'm assuming that your induction then for new people, that also there's a big focus on it then as well, is there?
There's a big focus in induction across all levels. I'm heavily involved in induction for early professionals, you know, as you know, and it's a fantastic talking point for our attraction for all of our early professionals, you know, from trainees and interns to apprentices and to graduates, especially. It's a major attractive, you know, point for them that these values have stood the test of time, and it's also something they understand, and we have stories to tell about each one, right?
Candice Lee, does that ring true to you? Any of what Kate said then? Do you have anything you want to add on that part?
Yeah, I think it's quite, you know, as you know, Kate was saying, you know, when you have that ability to have a core set of values that can run throughout the organization, and you can see it everywhere, you know, I feel values can be a real stabilizing effect. And as Kate was saying, you know, when a company transitions or is going through, you know, different stages, whether that's acquisitions or mergers or whatever it is, you know, that can create a real you know, kind of unease in the organization, because people do start to question their place and whether they still belong. And I think values help organizations to sort of enable or facilitate recalibration. And I think that enables staff to unite around common objectives, common themes, and then that enables them to really move forward.
Actually, Candice, sticking with you, our research has found it's not enough. Oh dear, my screen's gone. Can everyone still see me and hear me? Yeah,
we can see you.
Just flew up something strange then. Sorry, our research found it's not enough to have them printed or you know, put up somewhere, distributed on the intranet. It is about them being a part of our DNA. And Kate, you talked. I can imagine how that's happened at IBM. They need to walk the corridors, sit at the desks. Now they need to operate in the virtual world as well, don't they? Because obviously, lots of time we're all remote from each other, not in together as teams. But how do you think it's possible that organisations can ensure the authenticity in their values?
I think probably it's largely down to action. I think it's two things. I think number one, it's making sure that those values are embedded in everything. So I think, you know, when we're, you know, as you said earlier, Sally, developing programs and we're, you know, creating, you know, pieces, communications, marketing, whatever it is that we're doing, we need to see the values embedded in that, because I think we can then springboard from that into quite visible communication and visible action. And that's when I think you can demonstrate that you actually genuinely believe or engage with that value set. So you're right, it's great to have it up on the wall, but unless as a team member I feel like I can use that value set to decision make and to actually create you know, whether it's, you know, a new strategy or whether it's a new product or whatever it is that I'm doing, I can use that value set as a guide, as a set of guiding principles. You know, in essence, that's a way that whatever brand or organization you're in, you have the ability to demonstrate that holds true to you, because I can see it in everything that you're doing. So for me, it's about embedding in order that we get action, and the right kind of action that demonstrates those values.
It actually makes it easier, doesn't it, to have them as guiding principles. It's a bit like earlier when I was talking about how we related ours to the Princess Royal Training Awards. Hopefully you are all able to see how that's been reflected in your dealings with us, in your experience of the awards, and it gives you that sort of something to check back in with, you know, that makes it I just like the practical tool part of values, really. So how were yours formed at Dermalogica, and how have they changed over the years?
Well, I think they've always been inherent. Our founder, Jane Werwind, when she started the company, actually Dermalogica started as an education company, the International Dermal Institute, and it was founded really because there was actually a difference in sort of Jane could see a difference in the education and the vocational training that she'd had in Britain, and she'd moved to America, and there was a disconnect between, you know, some states didn't even have vocational training for skin therapists or beauty therapy trades. So she wanted to kind of ensure that people had skills, but I think it was also about reputation, because, you know, our industry has often suffered from, you know, a skewed reputation of what we do and why we do it. And she wanted to demonstrate that actually if you have knowledge and you have skills, you can elevate the reputation. People can respect what you do. So I think that was very much the sort of core. So our values at Dermalogica are education, personalization, human touch. And it was connected to the idea that we're a hands-on trade. So that's where the human touch comes from. We recognize that actually human intention and the practical skills that we use and provide is very important in the way that we operate. You know, people who come to our industry are very humanly connected individuals, genuinely. And so that human touch element has always been core, as it's the nature of our business. But then when you look at the education that follows, because it's all about raising knowledge and skills. And then, of course, personalization was a recognition that everyone is individual, and that it's never going to be a one size fits all in every situation. And you know, so from Dermalogica's point of view, that sort of idea behind speaking to the individual and trying to find solutions and opportunities for the individual has always been central to how we operate as a business. And that personalization reflects through everything that we do, from the way we design and develop our products, to the way we design and develop our programs, to how we interact with our people and how we interact with our customers. And I think, you know, when Dermalogica was acquired by Unilever in about 2016, you know, they sat around a table and kind of said, well, how do we formalize these principles? And they sort of distilled it down to those three values, but the values have always been there. It wasn't changing it or going with a different idea. It was just trying to articulate them in a way that could make them easy to follow for everybody. And just much as Kate said, you know, when you go through some transition or change, you need a way in which you can help guide and direct the teams, and the business knows what it stands for. And for us, it had always been the case. It still is the case. Our values haven't changed. They're still what they are.
That's a good point. When you were Unilever, as you said, when you changed to be taken over effectively, or merged, or however it was done, do you think that was a concern at all about losing the values that obviously were so? Because I've met Jane and I know how she you know, personifies the Dermalogica values anyway. So it's so clear in her you know, how she is. So I can well imagine how Dermalogica then, you know, grew. Was it a challenge at all when you became part of Unilever?
No, I think one of the core things, if you speak to Jane, and actually I was, you know, on a webinar where Jane was talking literally 2 nights ago, and I think for her and Raymond, for them it was very much a case of whether the values aligned. So actually, you know, becoming part of the portfolio, a central kind of consideration for them was whether there was an alignment with the value system, because that was really, really important to them. And I think throughout the organization, you know, Dermalogica, we call ourselves a bit of a tribe, because we're all kind of beating our drum about, you know, what we're passionate about. And so I think there was very much an internal force anyway to make sure that, you know, we held true to what we believed that we stood for. And I think it's only strengthened, if anything. It's strengthened because we've been able to, as I say, kind of formalize it a little and help align everyone to that. So no, it didn't create. Of course, there's always through the change period, people are questioning because they're trying to see how it all works. But over time, it's been very clear and very evident that the value systems definitely align. And from our point of view, the staff are galvanized and they know where they're going.
I was going to ask you how important the values are to your brand, but I feel like you've answered that through all that you've been saying, because I think that when values really are embedded and are really strong, they become the brand, don't they? Almost, it's, you know, it's almost that's this in all risk registers should be. If we start moving away from our values, the brand reputation and the equity within that brand is gonna suffer. So
Absolutely. I was just going to say, Sally, just briefly, I think that without the brand values, you also lose your differentiators. And so I think what businesses and organizations need to recognize is that without those values, it's quite hard. It can become quite hard to define yourself, because there's lots of outer market forces that are pushing in on you to change, conform, do all sorts of things in the marketplace. And I think as an organization, it's very easy to kind of absorb all that pressure and almost lose your identity. And so I think that is where values become really important, is how not only for the people inside the organization to feel like they have purpose, but at the same time and can play a meaningful role in the business's success. But it's also about how you stand out in the marketplace, and how you define yourself, because those values will become integrally connected to what people see.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Lee, let me move to you. The behaviour of employees affect other staff members and also the delivery of company services. We know that. And this can impact on sales, productivity, efficiency, customer satisfaction. How do you ensure that your employees understand your values, and how do you demonstrate them as a means of achieving your purpose at Veolia?
No, absolutely. I think in terms of the understanding, it's going back to everything we've said so far around they're not being hollow and not being seen as a plaque on the wall. They have to be very real, very authentic. And I really like the point that Kate said earlier around the whole telling stories and not underestimating the importance of telling a story, which leads very nicely to what Candice said around it feeling very, very authentic. And I think now more than ever, employers and organisations are feeling the pressure. You know, we're feeling we're in an uncertain market. We're finding it very difficult to attract and retain employees. And the behaviours socially as well as organisationally have changed as a result of the pandemic. And we need to factor that in, not just in terms of what we're doing now when it comes to values, but also what we're doing moving forward. One of the things that we did at Veolia in getting our employees to understand exactly what we mean is developing a toolkit around what are the behaviours under each of our values? What are the positive behaviours that we associate with that value? And what are the not so positive behaviours that we associate? Because more often than not, we go out to our people through the consultation process and they say, absolutely, we're really bought into this. Our values are really, really visible across the business. But sometimes we just want you to tell us exactly what you mean. And that was really quite striking. And when we went through our own consultation process to relaunch and redefine our values, we engaged various teams throughout the business to kind of give feedback. So what are those behaviours? What's good behaviour in relation to these values? And our 5 values are community spirit, customer focus, innovation, respect and responsibility. So giving everybody the opportunity to form part of that process. And very simply, we defined a behavioural toolkit under each of our values that outlined what does our value mean and what are these behaviours? And how can you then move forward collectively to deliver against them? And we've had some really good feedback.
What was the impetus though to redo them, refresh them?
Well, I mean, Veolia, we've existed for 160 years and we've grown over many, many years organically and through acquisition. And our values have also kind of sat alongside our purpose. We're very much a purpose-led organisation. And we've spoken very much to our workforce around our purpose is very much our why we're here and why we exist. And our values are really how we're going to get there. So how do our values enable us to kind of move closer to our purpose? So the kind of whole emphasis around the whole refresh was around how do we make sure that values are just as important as our purpose? We can't achieve our purpose without our how we're going to get there. So how do we make sure we connect our teams to our values in order for us to deliver our purpose?
So how did you go about choosing your values? I mean, it was interesting to hear how Kate says it happened at IBM, and can't remember the term she used now, but I loved it. I wrote it down. How did you do it at Veolia?
I mean, our values have existed for many years, and when we went out to speak to our teams around, well, what values, what does it mean to you? Our values are very much evident within the behaviours that exist within our business. So some of those behaviours you can touch and feel already. And does it feel right that they form part of the existing value set? One of the things that came out of it in the feedback was 2 of the values kind of sat a little bit separate. So we had, in the previous launch, we had customer and focus as 2 separate values. And the feedback was actually, we've got slightly too many. We think we need to kind of bring it back together and we combine them both. So actually customers and focus now become customer focus. It's all around those customer focused solutions to deliver sustainability to achieve our purpose of ecological transformation. So as part of that process, we were able to really hear from our people to be clear in terms of what they think, what they see and feel, and have the opportunity to define the behaviours.
And how do you actually go about checking that that they are being lived, you know, the behaviours particularly? Because it is, you know, it's like anything, isn't it? You can get really into it, really focus on it, and then drift away from it and forget a little bit. How do you think you keep that alive?
I think there's a number of different ways. I think there's the continual pushing of awareness and upskilling and providing content where people can access. So for example, when we relaunched and refreshed our values, we, similar to kind of City and Guilds, we put a video together that we could kind of publish out in the business that was very, very visible. We've also ensured that we look at holding face-to-face delivery sessions on purpose and value. So what are our purpose and values training, and how do we use those sessions to connect people together? But there's also the importance around measuring it. What do our people say about our values? In our latest engagement survey, over 80% of our people surveyed felt that our values were put into place in their business area. And of 93% of those surveys felt that the work contribution was useful. So we're really seeing that whole return on connection to purpose and connection to values. But it's important to kind of point out it's not just about launching and staying still. It's a continuous moving process. So it's not a great, we've done all this great stuff, we've launched it, you tell us it all kind of happens in the business. We have to keep moving forward with it. So as we move forward this year, it's that continuous kind of evolution around, well, how do we measure it in our day-to-day business? How do we measure it through performance evaluations? And how do we, you know, similar to kind of the impact report that you talked about, Sally, how do we make sure that as our own impact report, collectively through our engagement survey results, through our performance reviews, through what our people tell us, that we can really measure the success of values in the business?
It actually gives you something as well when people aren't following them, doesn't it? To some way to have the conversation as well. So, you know, because we don't live in a perfect world, and however much we might like to, you know, think that it provides us with the answer for everything, I think sometimes difficult conversations can be facilitated through actually having a framework, which, let's face it, a clear set of behavioural values gives you. Candice, Kate, how do you measure, you go about measurement within your organisations?
So in IBM, and much like it sounds like Veolia, we have client engagement surveys, and our values are embedded in those engagement surveys, and likewise performance assessment. So we're measured against dimensions, and those dimensions do map directly back to our values. I was really interested in what you were talking about, behaviors in particular, because in 2012, we ran another jam specifically to develop behaviors off the back of our 3 values. So each value had then 3 behaviors then attributed. And through the behaviors, it became even more alive, like so much easier to understand and to demonstrate our values by breaking that down and making it more specific in terms of how we behave and things we do. And then it was much easier to label it when it comes time to assessment for our own performance, and then looking at our engagement, our client engagement surveys.
Candice, what about you?
Yeah, I think for us, it's about you know, performance assessments, and we look at how that translates when staff are doing different jobs and roles. It's probably more challenging to track in certain roles in the organization, and probably, you know, like many leadership teams, it's an evolving process of how you try and work out how you best measure and see it in different situations. You know, as a skin therapist, it's quite plain to see whether you're personalizing the experience, providing education to your customer, and connecting with them with your technical skills. But I think as organizations have lots of different, you know, functions and different parts of the organization, we have to constantly reevaluate how we demonstrate those values in different areas of the business. And, you know, it's not to say that businesses always get it right. And, you know, organizations, you have to work at it. You know, sometimes it doesn't quite go as you anticipated. And then you have to take a step back and say, I'm not sure that worked in a way that reflected who we really are. So how do we adjust? How do we, you know, tweak so that it moves in the right direction? So I think it's a constant evaluation process. But, you know, we also do engagement surveys at Dermalogica and, you know, check in on the staff. And of course, as I say, performance management assessment does connect to that. And certainly we try to evolve that process, and we're still trying to evolve that process. And actually, we've just had a strategy refresh, which launched for our next 3-year strategy. And actually, one of our core strategy pillars is around values. So we're going to be doing a lot of work in the next, you know, sort of couple of years to kind of, again, just strengthen that, galvanize that, make sure that we're really digging down to make sure that we can make those values, as Lee said, kind of come to life for everybody, make sure that it does feel that it's easy for me to identify how I demonstrate that behavior in a way that reflects the values.
No, I agree, Candice. I think there's also this whole piece around celebrating success. And I think, you know, our people are really proud to live by our values and tell us so. So how do we kind of share those stories, back to the tourist selling piece, to make sure that, you know, we celebrate that and we call out and recognise it?
That is so important, isn't it? That celebrating success. I think the two things there, that hard work, it is work. I think that sometimes, particularly historically, values can have been seen as a little bit of, oh, we need to have some values, here's some nice words, we all feel a bit good about them, slap them up there. But again, through the research, we know that we're all becoming much more choosy about, you know, where, as consumers of anything, what is it, what are we buying? Not just the price, but all elements of it. And I think that's where, you know, values are so much part of that now in all of our choices. And I think that but that does mean there's work to be had, because, you know, you can't always cost cut, you know what I mean, don't you? Yes. Cost cut and remain true. You've got to really think through, well, how then do we make sure that we, you know, continue to live our values authentically? I can see that we're running out of time, so I need to start wrapping us up now. Actually, just before I do, is that for all of you, which is the one thing that you think is the most important, I guess, asset of everything you know about the values that you work with in your organisations? What is the one thing that you think stands out the most, that's most important? I will start with you, Lee.
It has to be celebrating where we've had good stories. I think that's the part that our people really like and really recognise. So I think it's more of the celebration and really focusing on, it's not always what you do, it's how you do it that counts.
Love that. Candice, what about you?
Sorry, I was just trying to get my unmute. I think for me, it's about how your values connect with your purpose and your mission as a business. I think that for me is really important, because I think if teams can see the thread, then their work can be meaningful. And I think that is something that helps teams to feel fulfillment in what they're doing every day.
Thank you, great. And Kate?
Yeah, I think, well, for us, it would have to be the storytelling, because that's what keeps it alive. It's what keeps it real. It gives us examples for further behavior, and it keeps it going throughout the vocabulary. It keeps it in our vocabulary, regardless of where we are in the organization.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your stories. If I can just attempt to sort of sum up what we've heard today, and also I know what our report concluded. It's clear that involving people and having a consultative process is going to bring you much more joy. Company values and ethics are becoming increasingly important to success, full stop, so we can't ignore them. leadership must really walk the walk and invest in all parts of it for it to be real and for everybody to really embrace them. And actually, if you do put all of the effort into this, you will get a return, and you'll attract the right people that will be a good cultural fit and embrace and encourage your culture to grow more. So I think that it's really clear that values hold a huge amount of value to us. I was trying to think of another word for value and couldn't quickly enough. So moving on from that, I think ILM will be, well, I know ILM are going to be doing a follow-up session of series of podcasts. So there'll be some more in-depth individual conversations. So please do watch in your inboxes for details about them. And I know that I'm sure in the report, I haven't been able to follow in all of the comments, but I'm sure the reports have all been shared. And I said that at the beginning anyway, things will be sent out afterwards. The Princess Rule Training Awards, I must give them a plug. They are open for applications now. We're running workshops. So I think the deadline is going to be the end of March. So if you're interested in finding out more, do get in touch. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found it useful, and enjoy the rest of your Thursdays. Thank you very much, everybody.